My trembling fingers tried to dial the number while tears blurred my vision. Sitting on that makeshift cot, with a thin blanket over my shoulders, I felt the night's cold seeping through the cracks of the shed. The same shed where we had stored tools and junk for years was now my bedroom, my home. How did we get to this point? How could my own son allow this? Before I continue, tell me in the comments which city you're reading this story from, and if you've ever experienced something similar, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss stories like this one. I'm Elizabeth Miller, 68 years old, and just 6 months ago I was sleeping in the master suite of that house. The house I designed alongside Robert, my husband, God rest his soul. Every brick, every beam, every corner of that place holds a memory of ours. It was with these wrinkled hands that I chose the colors of the walls, planted the rose bushes in the garden, prepared Sunday lunches for the whole family. And now, here I am, shivering with cold in a damp shed, while I hear the laughter of Jessica, my daughter-in-law, hosting friends for yet another dinner in the living room. When Robert passed away a year ago, I did what he asked on his deathbed. Take care of Michael, Elizabeth. Our son still needs support to build his life. And that's what I tried to do. I transferred the house to Michael's name after his marriage to Jessica. A pretty girl, always well-dressed, from an important family in Boston. At least that's what she claimed. My Michael, always so dedicated to his studies, such a good companion, seemed enchanted with her. Mom, you'll continue living in the guest suite, the one we built for Grandma Helen, remember? It'll be comfortable, and you'll always be close to us, he assured me, holding my hands that day at the notary's office. I believed him. How could I not believe my own son? For the first 2 months, everything went well. I helped in the kitchen, tended the garden, and even gave some advice to the couple. But soon I noticed Jessica's looks when I entered rooms, the way she stopped talking when I approached, the disguised comments about people who don't know when it's time to give space. On an ordinary Tuesday, I returned from church and found my things being moved from the suite to one of the smaller rooms at the back of the house. Elizabeth, I hope you don't mind, Jessica said, with that artificial smile. My parents are visiting us this weekend, and we need the suite for them. It's just for a few days. I accepted it silently. After all, they were her parents. But the few days turned into 2 weeks, and then into an entire month. When her parents left, my belongings didn't return to the suite. Instead, I was informed that the smaller room would be my new little corner. It's more practical, Mrs. Miller, Jessica explained. You make noise in the morning, and we need to sleep well. Michael has been working late with Richard. Richard, my daughter Nancy's husband, an elegant man with impeccable suits and conversations about investments that I never fully understood. He had proposed a partnership to Michael, something about the financial market, high-yield investments. Robert would have been immediately suspicious, but my son was dazzled by the idea of getting rich quickly. Nancy had always been more like her father, suspicious, cautious. But since she met Richard, she changed, became more distant, more concerned with appearances. She rarely visited me. When I suggested to Michael that perhaps Richard's business wasn't as solid as it seemed, he got irritated. You don't understand anything about finance, Mom. Richard is helping me multiply what Dad left. Please don't meddle in this. Those words cut me deeply, but I swallowed the pain. Maybe he was right. What would an old woman like me, who only knew how to take care of the house and do basic accounting, understand about investments? But the truth is that I did understand, and quite well. While Robert was the engineer who signed the projects, I was the one who managed every cent of our construction company for 30 years. Every material purchase, every payroll, every contract. I knew how to recognize manipulated numbers when I saw them, and the papers that Richard showed my son had all the signs of fraud. But how could I prove this without further alienating my son? Rock bottom came on a Sunday. I returned from a weekend at my sister's house in Vermont and found the room empty. In the kitchen, Jessica was waiting for me with a cup of tea. "Mrs. Miller, we've made a change. You're taking up too much space, and we need the room for Michael's office. We've prepared the shed for you. It's very cozy." Cozy. An old cot, a heater that barely worked, a makeshift bathroom with a shower that only gave cold water. My things. Photos, clothes, memories, piled up in cardboard boxes. The shed where Robert kept his tools, and where I never liked to enter because of the spiders. That's where my son and his wife wanted me to live. That night I cried like I hadn't since Robert's death. But they weren't just tears of sadness. There was anger, an anger that grew inside me mixed with a determination I thought I had lost. The next day, I woke up with pain all over my body. The night's cold had worsened my rheumatism. I could barely get up from the cot. That's when I heard voices coming from the main house. Jessica, Michael, and Richard discussing money. I realized the shed was close enough to the office window for me to hear everything. "We need the house as collateral," Richard was saying. "The bank is putting pressure, and clients are starting to ask too many questions." "But the house is in my name," Michael replied, sounding nervous. "If everything goes wrong—" "Nothing is going to go wrong," Richard's voice rose. "It's just a temporary loan. In 3 months we'll quintuple the value and pay it all back. Your mother will never know." "And if she finds out?" Jessica asked. "That old lady is smarter than she seems." Richard laughed. "And what will she do? She's practically on the street. Nobody will believe a confused and senile old woman." Those words triggered something in me. Senile? Confused? Me, who managed a construction company for decades, who multiplied the family's assets while Robert built the buildings. No, they didn't really know me. I waited until everyone left and dragged myself to the house, ignoring the pain. In Michael's office, I rummaged through the drawers until I found the documents Richard had left. Bank statements, contracts, promises of impossible returns. It was exactly what I suspected. A pyramid scheme. My son-in-law was deceiving dozens of people, including my own son. And now he wanted to use the house, my house, as collateral for his frauds. I returned to the shed and picked up my cell phone. There was a number I hadn't called in years, but that was still etched in my memory. Charles Morgan, Robert's former partner, our friend of decades, who knew all our financial secrets. And you, what would you do if you discovered that your own son was being manipulated and your house was about to be used in a scam? My hands were shaking as I dialed the number. 3 rings, 4. Then the familiar voice. "Hello? Charles, it's Elizabeth. I need your help." I told him everything. The transfer of the house, Jessica's manipulation, my situation in the shed, and especially what I had discovered about Richard. Charles was silent for a few moments. "Elizabeth, do you remember our emergency plan? The cottage in New Hampshire, the investments in the name of the shell company?" How could I forget? Robert had always been cautious. We had assets unknown to our children, saved for emergencies. A cottage in the mountains, overseas accounts, secure investments, all managed by Charles after Robert's death. "Yes, I remember, Charles." "It's all still there, intact. You don't have to stay in that shed for another day." A wave of relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by determination. "I don't just want to escape, Charles. I want justice. I want my house back. I want to protect my son." On the other end of the line, I could feel Charles smiling. "Then let's do this right, Elizabeth. I have some contacts in the federal police who investigate financial fraud. If Richard is doing what you say, He's deceiving many people besides Michael. I spent the night gathering all the evidence I could find. I photographed documents, recorded conversations, made detailed notes. The next morning, with the pain of rheumatism still punishing me, I used the only money I had saved to take a taxi to Charles's office. When I arrived there, I realized I wasn't the only victim of Richard's schemes. In the waiting room 3, elderly people were waiting with folders similar to mine. They had all invested their savings in Richard's scheme, attracted by promises of miraculous returns. "Mrs. Miller," Charles greeted me with a tight hug. "We're building a solid case against your son-in-law. But I need you to understand something. This will also affect your daughter and your son. Are you prepared?" I looked at those elderly people in the waiting room. People like me who had worked their entire lives to have some dignity in old age, and now were being deceived by a man with an easy smile and pretty words. "I'm prepared, Charles. It's time to wake my children up to the truth." That afternoon, Charles took me to the cottage in New Hampshire, a cozy place with a beautiful view of the mountains. There I finally was able to take a hot shower, sleep in a decent bed, and plan my next steps. 3 days later, the investigation officially began. A federal police detective specializing in financial crimes, Detective Paul Rivera, came to interview me. I showed all the evidence, explained the situation with the house, and reported what I had heard about the loan using the property as collateral. "Mrs. Miller, your son-in-law is involved in something much bigger than you imagine," explained the detective. "We've been receiving complaints from various parts of the country. He promises impossible returns, manipulates statements, uses money from new investors to pay the old ones. It's a classic scheme, but well elaborated." "And my children? Do they know about this?" Detective Rivera hesitated. "Your daughter Nancy is beginning to suspect. She contacted us last week, but didn't formalize the complaint. As for your son, Michael, I'm afraid he's very involved. Maybe he doesn't know everything, but he's collaborating." That broke my heart. My Michael, who grew up being an honest boy, was now involved in fraud. How did I not notice before? I want to talk to my children, I decided, before it's too late. "It's risky," warned the detective. "If Richard suspects the investigation, he might destroy evidence or even flee the country." "I'll be careful," I promised, "but I need to try to save my children." That night, I called Nancy. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice low as if she didn't want to be heard. "Mom, where are you? Michael said you traveled without telling anyone." "Nancy, we need to talk. It's about Richard." Silence on the other end. Then a deep sigh. "You know, don't you? About the fake investments, about the lies." "I know, sweetheart. And there's more. I've been living in a shed for weeks. Jessica kicked me out of the house." Nancy made a sound that was half sob, half desperate laughter. "I suspected when I came to visit you and Jessica said you had gone out. I saw your things piled up in the shed, but I couldn't believe it was possible. How did Michael allow this?" "Your brother is blind, sweetheart, both to Jessica and to Richard's promises. But we can still save him. You need to trust me." We arranged to meet the next day, away from Richard's sight. Nancy was finally opening her eyes. Perhaps there was hope for our family after all. As I hung up the phone, I felt a pang of doubt. What if I was making a mistake? What if Michael never forgave me for reporting his brother-in-law? What if I lost both my children forever? But then I remembered Robert's words shortly before he passed. "Elizabeth, you've always been the strength of this family. When the storm comes, and it will come, be the rock that doesn't move." It was time to be that rock, for myself, for the elderly, people deceived by Richard, and especially for my children. who needed to be saved from their own choices. Tomorrow would be the day of confrontation. I was ready to fight, even if it meant sleeping many more nights in that cold shed, because some battles are worth any sacrifice. The coffee in the cup trembled along with my hands as I waited in the coffee shop in the Riverside neighborhood, far from Richard and Jessica's eyes. Nancy arrived breathless, her hair disheveled, deep dark circles marking her young face. She was no longer the elegant and confident girl that Richard had transformed her into. She was my daughter again, vulnerable and scared. "Mom!" She hugged me tightly as she hadn't done in years. I felt her tears dampening my shoulder. "Forgive me. I didn't know about the shed, about everything." "Sit down, sweetheart. We have a lot to talk about." I showed her the copies of the documents I had gathered. Evidence of Richard's frauds, manipulated bank statements, complaints from elderly clients who had lost everything. Nancy ran her fingers over the pages, horror growing in her eyes. "Richard told me they were legitimate investments, that we were helping these people multiply their assets." "And you believed him?" I asked, with no accusation in my voice. She lowered her eyes. "I wanted to believe. He gave me a life I never had. Trips, clothes, expensive restaurants. I felt important." I took her hands in mine. They were cold and trembling, just as mine had been that night in the shed. "Nancy, you are important. You always have been. You didn't need Richard for that." She cried silently for a few minutes. Then, as if a decision had been made, she wiped away her tears and straightened her shoulders. "What can we do to help Michael? He's completely involved in this, Mom. Richard convinced him to mortgage the house to cover a supposed investment." Me sting. Heart skipped a beat. "Is the house already mortgaged?" "Not yet. The papers are ready, but Michael is hesitating. Jessica is putting a lot of pressure on him. They say they need the money by the end of the week or they'll lose everything." It was worse than I had imagined. We had no time to lose. "Nancy, I'm working with the federal police. There's already an ongoing investigation against Richard, but we need to act quickly to save your brother." I explained the plan I had developed with Charles and Detective Rivera. Nancy listened attentively, nodding occasionally, asking pertinent questions. My smart daughter was back. "And you, Nancy? Are you prepared for the consequences? Richard will probably go to jail." She took a deep breath. "I already filed for divorce, Mom. Yesterday. He doesn't know yet. I'm gathering my things little by little. I'm afraid of him." An alarm went off in my head. Richard had always seemed controlled, educated, but the worst monsters usually wear the most convincing masks. "Has he hurt you, sweetheart?" Her eyes avoided mine. Not physically, but the words, the veiled threats, the control over everything I do, over who I see. It's like I'm in an invisible prison. At that moment, my determination multiplied. It wasn't just about recovering my house or exposing a financial fraud. It was about saving my children from toxic people who were destroying them. Tonight, I decided, we'll confront them tonight before they sign any mortgage papers. And so we did. At 7 p.m. we arrived at the house. My house. Nancy had the key, and we entered without warning. In the dining room, Michael, Jessica, and Richard were gathered around papers spread out on the table. When they saw us, the shock was evident on their faces. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Michael stood up, confused. "And Nancy, what's going on?" "We're here to prevent you from making the biggest mistake of your life, son." My voice came out firm without trembling. "I know everything about Richard's schemes, about how you kicked me out to the shed, and about the mortgage you're planning." Richard rose slowly, his face a mask of calm that didn't match the tension in his shoulders. "Mrs. Miller, I think you're confused. It must be your age. Why don't you go back to your comfortable room out there and rest a bit? My comfortable room? You mean the damp shed with an old cot, where I got sick for weeks from the cold? I turned to Michael. Did you know about this, son, that your wife put me to sleep in the tool shed? Michael's face went pale. He looked at Jessica, who maintained an impassive expression, just a slight tremor in the corner of her mouth. Jessica said you preferred to stay there, that you wanted privacy. I laughed without humor. Privacy? In a place full of leaks, without proper heating, where I got pneumonia? Is that the story she told you? Jessica stood up abruptly. Michael, let's not waste time with this. Your mother is obviously senile, making up things. And what is Nancy doing here? Shouldn't she be with her husband? Nancy stepped forward. I filed for divorce, Jessica, and I'm here to prevent my brother from losing everything because of you two. Richard finally lost his composure. You did what? You can't leave me, Nancy. Not after everything I've done for you. Everything you've done for me? You isolated me from my family, made me complicit in your frauds, turned me into a person I don't even recognize anymore. Nancy's voice trembled, with emotion, but her eyes remained steady. Michael seemed lost, looking from one to another as if watching a tennis match. What are you talking about? What frauds? That was my cue. I opened the folder I had brought with me and spread the documents on the table, covering the mortgage papers. This, son, falsified bank statements, promises of impossible investments, complaints from elderly clients who lost all their savings. Your brother-in-law is operating a classic pyramid scheme and wants to use our house, the house that your father and I built, as collateral to try to cover the holes. Richard advanced toward me, his face contorted with rage. You meddling old woman! You don't know what you're talking about! Michael positioned himself between us. Don't you dare speak to my mother like that! He picked up some of the documents, analyzing them quickly. Is this true, Richard? Are you defrauding these people? Of course not. They're high-risk investments. It's normal to have some temporary losses. And the house is just collateral. We'll never really lose it. Like we lost the apartment. In Riverdale? Nancy interrupted. Or the car you said was ours but was in someone else's name. Richard, I've seen the documents. I know we're broke. I know we're using money from new clients to pay the old ones. It was at that moment that Richard's cell phone rang. He answered, moving away a bit. His face grew even paler. What do you mean the police are at the company? Who authorized? Don't let them touch anything. I'm on my way. When he hung up, his look was of pure hatred. What have you done? What we should have done a long time ago, I replied calmly. The federal police have been investigating your schemes for weeks, Richard. Right now, they're confiscating all the documents from your company. It's over. The chaos that followed was quick and intense. Richard tried to flee, but two plainclothes officers who were on standby outside detained him. Jessica was screaming, oscillating between threats and pleas. Michael was in shock, sitting in the chair looking at the documents as if he couldn't believe it. How did you know all this, Mom? He finally asked, his voice almost a whisper. I heard your conversations through the office window, which was near the shed, and I know how to recognize fake numbers when I see them. Don't forget that I was the one who managed your father's construction company for 30 years. At that moment, Detective Rivera entered the room. Mrs. Miller, we need your formal statement, and your children's too, if they can accompany us to the station. The following hours were exhausting. Statements, documents to sign, endless questions. When we were finally released, it was already past midnight. Richard remained in custody, as did 3 of his partners. Jessica, although not arrested, was being investigated for possible complicity. Michael took me back to the house, to my real house. Without saying a word, he led me to the master suite. "This room has always been yours, Mom. I apologize for allowing Jessica to treat you that way. I didn't know about the shed. She told me you had chosen to stay there, that you liked the privacy." "And you believed that? That I would prefer a damp shed to the house I built?" He lowered his eyes, ashamed. I wanted to believe many things. In Jessica, in Richard, in the possibility of getting rich quickly without the hard work I saw you and Dad have throughout your lives. I sat on the bed, my bed, and felt the soft mattress under my tired body. Your father and I worked hard, yes, but we never deceived anyone, never trampled on values to get what we wanted. And look how much we managed to build. Michael sat beside me, silent tears streaming down his face. "Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? And you, would you be able to forgive a son who allowed you to sleep in a shed while he lived comfortably in the house you built?" I looked at my son, my boy who was now a man full of flaws and regrets, and saw in him the same lost look that Robert had when he made a mistake and came to ask me for advice. Forgiveness is a process, Michael. It doesn't happen overnight. But we are family, and true families find their way back to each other, even after the worst storms. He hugged me, sobbing like when he was a child and afraid of thunder. I let him cry, let him release all the guilt and regret. In the weeks that followed, many things changed. Richard was formally indicted for various financial crimes. Investigations revealed that his scheme had harmed more than 200 people, mainly the elderly, in amounts exceeding $10 million. Jessica, although trying to pass herself off as a victim, ended up confessing that she knew everything and had helped recruit new investors. Michael, despite having his name linked to Richard's company, managed to prove that he was just beginning to get involved and didn't have complete knowledge of the frauds. Still, he had to bear part of the civil responsibility, which meant selling some assets to help in the restitution to the victims. The house, however, remained intact. Since it was never mortgaged, it didn't enter the process. Michael insisted on returning it to my name. "It's rightfully yours, Mom. It always has been." Nancy moved to a small apartment downtown, where she began to rebuild her life. She went back to studying, resumed old friendships that Richard had pushed away, and gradually regained her self-confidence. As for me, I returned to my suite. The shed was renovated and transformed into a small library, where I now spend hours reading and occasionally looking out the window, remembering those cold nights that, ironically, warmed my determination. Charles continues to be my faithful friend and advisor. It was he who suggested that I tell my story, to alert other people about how families can be destroyed by greed and appearances. Today, 6 months after that night of confrontation, we are beginning to rebuild our family. It's not easy. There are scars that may never completely disappear. Michael still struggles with guilt. Nancy still has nightmares about her marriage to Richard. And I still find myself looking at the shed sometimes, remembering how I felt small and disposable. But I also remember how that place gave me back something I had lost after Robert's death. My strength, my courage, my ability to fight for what is right. This morning I received a letter. It was from a lady named Dorothy, one of Richard's victims. She wrote to thank me for reporting the scheme before more people were harmed. She told me she was using the compensation money to visit her daughter in Canada, a dream she had postponed for years. "You saved more than savings," the letter said. "You saved dreams and dignities." Sitting on the porch, with Dorothy's letter in my hands, I observed the garden I replanted. The rose bushes are beginning to bloom again. Some plants don't survive the winter, but the strongest ones, those with deep roots, resurface even more beautiful in the spring. That's how I feel today, like a rose bush that survived the harshest winter and now blooms with more vibrant colors. The shed didn't break me. On the contrary, it made me rediscover the woman I always was, determined, intelligent, capable of facing storms. Michael appears on the porch, bringing me a coffee. His face still carries the marks of guilt, but his eyes have a new sparkle, a determination that reminds me of Robert. He sits beside me, in silence for a few minutes, just contemplating the garden with me. You know, Mom, Dad always said you were the strongest person he knew. I didn't fully understand what he meant. I thought strength was about muscles, about commanding respect, about never showing weakness. Now I understand that true strength is about resilience, about maintaining your values even when everything seems to be crumbling around you. I smile, touching his hand. Your father was a wise man, and you're learning, son. We're all learning every day. On the horizon, the sun begins to set, casting golden tones over the garden. Life isn't perfect. It never was. We still have many challenges ahead, many wounds to heal. But we're together again, an imperfect family, full of scars and regrets, but also of love and hope. From the cold shed to the recovered house, my journey wasn't just about walls and roofs. It was about rediscovering my worth, about fighting for justice, about protecting those I love, even when they don't know they need to be protected. Thank you for reaching the end. If this story touched you in some way, like and share it with someone who needs to hear this. And remember, it's never too late to stand up and fight for what is rightfully yours.